Good morning, History 1700 students. Today is week 1, day 2, so 1.2. Got a few emails from some of you saying that you missed the Google Meet yesterday. Yes, there will be Google Meets every Tuesday from now on. I will send you invites the night before. Okay, I'm sorry I didn't get that invite out sooner. That's my fault. Please forgive me on that one. I will be as forthcoming as possible on the communication. And actually, when I thought about it, I will be sending you an email every class day, so every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with these instructional videos. And I'll also put it in the announcements, so you should be able to, if you're not getting the emails for some reason or missed the emails somehow, you should be getting them in the campus announcements. So please check both so you're not missing anything. Just remember, oral history research paper. I will give the hints that I gave yesterday in this email that I will send with this video. And again, if you have any questions, please email me and I will get back to you in a timely manner within 24 hours, I promise. Email, again, is the best way to get a hold of me. So for today's topic, we are talking about Native Americans before Columbus, Columbus himself, and then early colonization. We'll get to the Native Americans before Columbus first. When you look at how Native Americans lived before Columbus, it looked like they had a great society going. But as we all know, the European colonizers felt like they were backwards in a lot of ways. Felt like they were backwards because they lacked technology. Okay, because they felt like, from what they saw, they didn't have much government, and they were matrilineal societies. They went with the mother. They just seemed a little too free and not organized to these European colonizers. But the nice thing about Native American culture before Columbus is they had a lot of things right. Okay, they weren't concerned about wealth and status. No one person owned the land. It was everybody's land. That stuff didn't matter to them at all. They took care of their own, very, very communal in nature. They took care of each other. That was, I think, where they really got it right. Again, matrilineal societies. The men proved themselves with hunting prowess, and actually the women did a lot of the agricultural work, and that's something that we forget. But I think their society was great. I would have wanted to live in that society where, especially, they took care of each other. Like I said, very communal in nature. And so when Columbus got there, he saw them as somebody. Hey, wow, we can use these guys as slaves. He took a few to Spain, kind of as museum pieces. But the biggest thing that happened with Native Americans after colonizers came was disease. They were totally did not have immunity to these diseases, and that was the white man's greatest weapon against the Native Americans, was disease. But a little bit more about Columbus. Okay, you've heard in your elementary and middle school days, especially, that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. And he thought the world was flat, right? Well, of course we know today that that is not the case. He sailed because of his major curiosity. That was one of the things that is put forth, that he was curious. He thought the world was flat. People thought the world was flat. He knew the world was round, and people were, his crew was scared out of their wits to go. We've heard those stories before. Well, in this reading by Lowen about Columbus, that's what he's trying to do. Again, he's a liberal-leaning historian. He's trying to dispel myths. But thankfully, he talks about these textbooks, these 12 textbooks that he talks about in this book, Lies My Teacher Told Me. He said 11 of them debunked the flat world myth, while one of them, 1 out of 12, still clung to it, which is kind of funny. I love that. But you know, Columbus is cast as a great hero, and definitely that is one of Lowen's aims in this reading, is to kind of burst the bubble that maybe Columbus isn't as heroic as he really should be, and that's why I want you to read this reading, because it's different, I think, than any other reading you've probably done or anything else you ever heard on Columbus, and that's the beauty of it. And so your short answer question is, you know, one of them is, does Columbus deserve hero status? And another thing about the Columbus voyage, and I've seen this myself in textbooks, is, you know, facts about the voyage get wrong. People get wrong and different. You know, the amount of time they're out there, the number of crew members, those kind of things. I've seen discrepancies in textbooks about those, and so that's one example of when facts do change. But most of the time, you see that most textbooks and readings get the facts correct. The facts remain the same. It's just the interpretations sometimes change, and that's what I was telling you yesterday with this historiography. It was what makes history fun, is looking at how these interpretations change over time. Like I was saying yesterday, you know, each generation rewrites history is the saying, but we could say, hey, each generation reinterprets history. And Lowen definitely has his own interpretation on Columbus, and I think you'll find his interpretation pretty fun, and that's why I included it in my readings. And then next thing I want to talk about is early colonization. One of the misconceptions about early colonization is that, oh, the English were on the scene first, because we think the English were on the scene first because they are the ones that had the staying power. They are the ones that remained. But in actuality, the Spanish were the first ones on the scene in the early 1500s, and just again decimated the Native American population because of disease. But the Spanish had a kind of a different view of the Indians. They first wanted to convert them. They did, use them as slaves. That didn't work out very well. But an event much later on in 1680 kind of set their policy with the Native Americans, mutual toleration. And that event was the Pueblo Revolt, where a part of New Mexico, what is Mexico now, they threw out all the Spanish colonizers, organized really well, threw them out, but then they realized, oh wow, these guys are going to help us. They're going to help us with our rivaling tribes. Hey, they're trading partners, and they're just nice to have around. So that was kind of the Spanish relationship with the Indians. Learned some mutual toleration. The French, they came second after the Spanish, and they, in my mind, had the best relationship with the Native Americans because they saw them as trading partners. Some of the French intermarried with the Indians. They treated them the most equally of any of the three major colonizers. The British come along, the English, whatever you want to call them, they came a little later to the scene because they had some inner turmoil going on. They were trying to conquer Ireland. You've heard of the king named Henry VIII and all that was going on there with the fracturing of the church because he wanted his divorce. So they were a little later on the scene, and they came in 1607. First of all, well, Roanoke Island, if you count that was earlier, and that was the Lost Society. If you've heard of that one, I won't go into that very much. But 1607, Jamestown. They'd seen the Spanish success. They were looking for gold. That was their main aim. It was a private entity called the Virginia Company. It wasn't British government sponsored at the first, but ran into a lot of trouble. They just had men, like 104 men, so no women to propagate the society. The men were more interested in looking for gold than really, farming or really setting up a society. And so by 8 years after they landed, 80% of them were dead. Hunger was a major problem. Obviously, disease was a little bit of a problem. But it wasn't until the 15, 16, 16 when they realized, gee, this search for gold isn't working. We're not finding the commodities we thought we would, so we got to set up something that's going to propagate the society. And that's when they, tobacco kind of became their gold, and obviously cotton later on. So agriculture, set up agriculture, and then it did become a British-sponsored colony a little bit later on. The Virginia Company pulled out. Major happening happened in two major happenings happened in 1619. Set up the first democratic body in what is now the New World. But unfortunately, the other thing that happened in 1619 is the first slaves, African slaves, arrived. And when they were setting up their society, slavery wasn't meant to be the principal workforce. It was indentured servitude, but indentured servants, indentured servants were people from the lower rungs of society, wanted to get over here to start a new life, signed a contract saying, hey, you pay my way here, I will be your servant for X amount of years, usually 5 to 7, and then once my term of service is up, hey, I can make my own destiny. But unfortunately, a lot of those indentured servants died before their terms of service were up, and so and there weren't as many of them coming out. So they turned out to African slaves because of their advantages. They kind of had a little bit more immunity to the disease. They obviously didn't have any rights under English common law, but the major advantage they had was obviously it was a self-propagating workforce. Okay, children of slaves become more slaves, and so with the opening of more land for tobacco, cotton cultivation, that kind of thing, they realized, gee, these indentured servants aren't really working, but there are not enough of them. Let's use African slaves, and so that's how slavery became the major workforce and became a major economic engine in the South. Also, got to mention, Virginia and Maryland were plantation style. Landed gentry, really kind of rebuilding the feudal system, if you will, in the New World. And so not as much social cohesion, very spread out. But New England, on the other hand, lots of social cohesion. People came in families. You set up small family farms, your family was your workforce. There wasn't that much need for slavery. And really in New England area, the slave variety they had mostly were house servants, and the economy was different. It was all agriculture down south with the cotton, the tobacco. Up north, it was fishing and timber, and obviously industry started a little bit later on, but very, very, very different. Religious freedom was bigger in the north and in New England. You've heard of the Puritans. Think Plymouth Colony. Think the first Thanksgiving. The legends surrounding that. But with the Puritans, kind of funny thing, they were coming across seeking religious liberty, but they weren't tolerant of anybody else, and so that led to people branching off. First they landed in Massachusetts Bay Colony. Some others people branched off, forming Connecticut, Rhode Island. For those who didn't agree with Puritans, that's another story in and of itself. It's no separation of church and state. So the leaders of the church were the leaders of the government. That didn't work out very well. You've heard of the Salem witch trials, and because of that, with no separation from church and state, that got out of hand, and the governor of Massachusetts said, no, we're done with this. Anyway, so and the differences in how the economy developed north and south really set the stage for the sectional tensions later on that eventually led to the Civil War. The South was dependent on slavery for its economy. with this plantation style economy with the cotton and the tobacco plantations. And then the North was didn't depend on slavery as much because it was small family farms, more social cohesion, like I've been saying. So the way that they were developed economically really helped lead to the sectional tensions later on, and that's what I wanted to get across with the early settlement. But you have 3 short answer questions, 1 from each of what I just talked about. Read the readings that go along with them. For the early settlement, it's that American Beginnings PowerPoint. That's your best source of information for that. And then you have the early Native American readings and the Columbus reading. I really encourage all of you to look at that James Loewen Columbus reading, because it really, like I said, is different than any other Columbus stuff you've ever read, and sheds him in a new light. You don't have to answer the question, you can answer another question, but I would encourage you to read that. It's very interesting. But please, any questions, please email me right away. There are a couple of you that missed the Google Meet yesterday. I'll send you out some information. Actually, in the email that I send today, I will send out the little outline I made, hints about your oral history research paper. Also, the 3 or 4 things that are the vision for this course for those of you who missed it. So this is the first instructional video, 1.2. We'll have another one tomorrow. It'll probably be a little shorter, but hopefully these are a good resource to get you going on your readings. So signing out now, and we'll see you tomorrow.